FLYNNS fate was sealed the moment she vanished into the night. The Iron Mark Pack's most skilled huntress, Arya had grown weary of being overlooked and underappreciated as an Omega. Her status in the pack hierarchy relegated to menial tasks, her anger simmered just below the surface, fueled by the constant whispers and snide remarks from the higher-ranking alphas. But when Kellen Darkshadow, enigmatic billionaire and rumored Lupari sympathizer swooped in with a lucrative offer, Arya's resolve crumbled. She was whisked away to his opulent estate, where she found herself at the mercy of the powerful and reclusive Kellen. As he toyed with her affections, Arya began to unravel threads of a sinister plot. One that threatened not only her own life, but also the fragile balance of power in the Lupari realm. As night gave way to dawn, Arya found herself trapped in a labyrinthine corridor, the air thick with the scent of decay and rot. Her breath came in short, sharp gasps as she stumbled through the darkness, desperate to escape the shadows that seemed to close in on all sides. Her footsteps echoed off the cold stone walls, the sound sending a shiver down her spine. Every step counted. Every heartbeat marked time against her capture. And then, suddenly, everything went black. Arya's vision returned, her eyes fluttering open to reveal a dimly lit chamber. The dimly lit chamber began to shudder, the cold stone walls vibrating with an otherworldly energy. Arya's eyes locked onto Kellen's, his eyes gleaming with an unnatural light as he spoke a single, chilling word. Arya's eyes locked onto Kellen's, her gaze burning with a mix of defiance and desperation. "I won't be kept here against my will," she spat, her voice low and even, but with an edge of venom that belied her calm demeanor. Kellen's expression remained impassive, but his eyes narrowed slightly as if he sensed the storm brewing inside Arya. "You're not going anywhere until we have a talk, Arya," he said, his voice smooth as silk, but laced with a hint of warning. Arya took a step back, her hand instinctively reaching for the knife sheathed at her belt. She knew better than to try it on Kellen. Those razor-sharp fangs were no match for her own blade. Still, she needed time and maybe a little space. "You won't be held captive," she repeated, her words dripping with determination. As she spoke, the darkness outside began to press in, as if night itself was seeping into the room. Arya's skin prickled with unease. She could feel eyes upon her, watching from the shadows. The presence that watched her felt almost familiar, like a second pair of hands on her shoulder, but not quite. Her breath caught, and for an instant, Arya's grip on reality faltered. The air seemed to thicken, heavy with anticipation, as if something was waiting just beyond the edge of perception. Arya's gaze darted towards Kellen, her eyes narrowing in suspicion. He leaned against a pillar, his expression unreadable behind a mask of polite concern. "I must say, I'm impressed by your willingness to put yourself in harm's way for me," Kellen said, his voice laced with a subtle, sugary sweetness that sent a shiver down Arya's spine. Arya's jaw clenched as she turned away from him, her boots echoing on the marble floor. She knew that look, had seen it in mirrors and shadows, but never up close like this. The air seemed to vibrate with tension as she walked away from him. "I'm not doing this out of altruism, Kellen," Arya said, her tone clipped and guarded, avoiding direct answers. Kellen chuckled, his words dripping with honey. "Oh, I'm not suggesting otherwise, Arya. I'm merely saying that your actions are motivated, shall we say." Arya quickened her pace, weaving through the ornate furniture with practiced ease. Her hand instinctively went to the silver locket around her neck, a family heirloom passed down through generations of Flynn women. A small, intricate engraving on its surface seemed to shimmer in the candlelight as she walked, a symbol of strength and resilience. "I'd rather not discuss the particulars," Arya said, her voice still guarded. Kellen's tone turned smooth, almost hypnotic. "Of course, Arya. I wouldn't dream of prying, though I must say I'm intrigued by your determination." As she moved further away from Kellen, the air grew colder, the shadows deepening into dark pools that seemed to swallow her whole. She shivered, her breath catching in her throat as the silence closed in around her. And then, just as she reached the doorway, Arya felt the weight of Kellen's gaze settle onto her skin, the hairs on the back of her neck standing on end. "I think you're trying to unsettle me, Kellen," Arya said, her voice barely above a whisper. Kellen's response was a low, husky laugh that seemed to rattle the chandeliers above them. As she reached the doorway, Arya felt Kellen's hand brush against hers, his fingers intertwining with hers in a movement so sudden it startled her. The skin on the back of her neck prickled with gooseflesh as she turned to see Kellen's eyes, once warm with concern, now blazing with a fierce intensity that made her question everything. Arya's fingers tightened around Kellen's hand as they stood at the doorway, his eyes burning with an intensity that made the air around her feel charged. The chandelier above them seemed to hum in response to Kellen's agitation, its crystals casting eerie shadows on the walls. "What's going on?" Arya asked, her voice tight and cautious, lacking its usual warmth. "You're the only one who can save our pack, Arya," Kellen said, his words dripping with a smooth, persuasive tone. "The Lupari pack's alpha is dying, and you're the key to his transformation." Arya snorted, a harsh, dismissive sound. "Don't bother, Kellen. I'm not some magic solution to all your problems." Her voice still held a guarded quality, but a hint of irritation seeped in, making her jaw twitch. The silence that followed was oppressive, weighing on Arya like a physical force. She shifted her weight, feeling trapped, caught in a web of fate she didn't understand. Kellen's grip tightened, his eyes flashing with a mix of desperation and warning as he whispered a single, chilling word. Arya's gaze drifted toward the door Kellen had warned her about, her eyes tracing the intricate carvings that seemed to dance in the flickering candlelight. The symbol on the locket still lingered in her mind, a faint echo of the confidence she'd once felt. Kellen's eyes narrowed, his concern etched on his face as he watched her approach the door. "Arya, I really must insist you don't proceed." "I'm not one to be swayed by empty warnings, Kellen," she replied coolly, her voice steady despite the flutter in her chest. "The door may be unlocked, but your wits are not," Kellen said with a hint of amusement, his tone smooth and soothing. "I implore you, for your own sake, don't open it." "I'll do what needs to be done," she said firmly, her clipped tone leaving little room for negotiation. The doorknob turned beneath her hand, and a low growl emanated from beyond the threshold. Arya's heart quickened as she pushed open the door, and the air seemed to thicken with an almost palpable menace. A chamber filled with rows of ancient artifacts and forbidden knowledge stretched out before her, the shadows cast by the flickering candles twisting into grotesque silhouettes. Her eyes adjusted slowly to the dim light, and she saw it. A message scrawled across the wall, its words seeming to leap out at her in stark relief. The air seemed to thicken with an almost palpable menace as her eyes adjusted to the dim light, and she saw it. The message scrawled across the wall, its words seeming to leap out at her in stark relief. The figure's eyes locked onto Arya's, its gaze burning with an unnatural hunger as it took a step closer, its hand reaching out to brush against the locket around her neck. The figure's eyes locked onto Arya's, its gaze burning with an unnatural hunger as it took a step closer, its hand reaching out to brush against the locket around her neck just as Kellen's voice cut through the air. "Arya, no! Don't let it see the mark!" Kellen's voice cut through the air like a whip, his words laced with an unspoken urgency that sent Arya's heart racing into a frantic beat. She felt the familiar tingle of her mark reacting to Kellen's presence, as if sensing the power that coursed through his veins. "Arya, no!" he repeated, his eyes locked onto hers, pleading for understanding. "You can't see it yet, but—" Arya shook her head, her mind racing with the implications of what she was seeing. The message on the wall seemed to sear itself into her brain, a warning scrawled in red ink that made her skin crawl. "I won't look!" she lied, trying to pull away from Kellen's grasp, but he held firm, his fingers closing around her wrist like a vice. "Please, Arya," he whispered, his breath hot against her ear. "You have to know the truth!" And then, in an instant, everything changed. The figure behind them took a step closer, its eyes fixed on the silver locket that hung from Arya's neck, and she felt a scream building in her throat as it spoke a single, chilling word.
Arya's eyes snapped up from her crouched position, scanning Kellen with a mixture of suspicion and wariness. The dim light in the grand hall danced across his features, but she'd never seen him look more determined. "You expect me to believe you're doing this out of the goodness of your heart?" Arya's voice was clipped, guarded, and laced with skepticism. She avoided direct answers, her words measured. Kellen's expression remained serene, but his eyes flashed with irritation. His jaw clenched, and he bit back a retort. "I'm trying to save you, Arya. I won't stand by while you put yourself in harm's way." His tone was smooth, charming, and designed to soothe her doubts. With a sudden movement, he reached out and grasped her arm, pulling her to her feet. The silver locket on her neck felt heavy, like a weight settling onto her skin. She tried to shake off his grip, but found herself pulled closer to him. The figure behind them took another step forward, its eyes fixed on the symbol etched into Arya's family crest. The air seemed to vibrate with an otherworldly energy, and Arya's breath caught in her throat. She felt the hairs on the back of her neck rise, as if the very air was charged with tension. "You're hiding something," she spat, trying to wrestle free from Kellen's grasp. What is it?" Her words were laced with accusation and distrust, her eyes flashing with anger. His eyes locked onto hers, and he spoke in a low, smooth tone that sent a shiver down her spine. His eyes flashed with a hint of desperation, and his grip on her arm faltered for an instant, before he whispered, "What happens when you let go of what you are, and become something you were never meant to be?" The figure behind them took another step forward, its eyes fixed on the symbol etched into Arya's family crest, and Kellen's gaze never wavered from hers, his voice barely audible. "Will you still be alive?"
Kellen's gaze never wavered from Arya's, his voice barely above a whisper. "What happens when you let go of who you are and become something you're not?" He spoke with an urgency that made her skin prickle, the hairs on the back of her neck standing on end. The symbol on her family crest seemed to burn brighter in the fading light, as if it too was responding to Kellen's words. Arya's mind reeled, her thoughts tangled with memories of her hunt and the strange sensation she'd been experiencing for weeks, like a presence watching her from just out of sight. Her grip on her dagger tightened, the familiar weight of it a comforting presence in her palm. As Kellen's words hung in the air, Arya felt a sense of unease creeping over her, like a slow-moving tide. It was a feeling she'd learned to recognize, one that usually signaled trouble. But this time it seemed different, like a warning that went beyond mere danger. The figure behind them took another step forward, its eyes fixed on the symbol like a predator sensing prey. Arya's instincts screamed at her to move, to put some distance between herself and whatever was coming for her, her feet itching to take flight. But Kellen's grip on her arm held her back, his hand like a vice that squeezed just hard enough to make her blood run hot. "What's at stake?" she asked, her tone clipped and guarded, her words chosen to deflect rather than reveal. Kellen's smile was like honey, dripping sweet and seductive. The figure behind them took another step forward, its eyes fixed on the symbol like a predator sensing prey. And in that moment, Kellen's grip on her arm tightened, his words hanging in the air like a choice. "Will you let the symbol consume you, or will you let it consume me?" Arya's eyes darted between Kellen and the figure behind them, her mind racing with the implications of their conversation. She had been so focused on escaping that she hadn't considered what would happen once she did. The symbol etched into the locket seemed to pulse with an otherworldly energy, drawing her in like a magnet. "I won't let you do this," Arya spat, trying to sound braver than she felt. But as she spoke, Kellen's grip on her arm tightened, his fingers digging deep into her skin. "You're not thinking clearly, Arya," he said, his voice low and husky. "The symbol is what's going to save you." Arya shook her head, trying to clear the cobwebs. What was she getting herself into? But as the figure behind them took another step forward, its eyes fixed on the symbol like a predator sensing prey, Arya felt a jolt of fear. She tried to pull away from Kellen, but he held fast. And then, in an instant, everything went black. Her vision blurred and receded, leaving her with only a faint image of the LOCKET's surface etched into her retina, the strange symbol that seemed out of place among her family's markings. It was as if her mind had tried to grab onto something just before she lost consciousness, but Arya couldn't quite grasp it. Arya slowly regained consciousness, her head throbbing in time with the hum of the Grand Hall's lanterns. She lay on a plush velvet couch, the silver locket still clutched in her hand. Kellen Darkshadow stood beside her, his eyes fixed intently on hers with an unnerving gentleness. As she struggled to sit up, Kellen pulled her into a seated position, his hands closing around her. "You've been through quite an ordeal," he said, his tone as smooth as honey. Arya's mind reeled, trying to grasp the events that had led her here, the sense of foreboding, the strange symbol etched onto the LOCKET's surface. Their eyes met in a charged moment of connection, Arya's grip on Kellen's hand tightening. "What do you want from me?" she asked, her tone firm, but laced with desperation. Kellen's smile never wavered. "I want to help you, Arya. I want to ensure your safety, your well-being." The soft creaking of the door announced the arrival of Sable, their loyal packmate and second-in-command. As Arya's gaze locked onto Sable's frozen form, Kellen's hands tightened around hers, his eyes flicking to the silver locket still clutched in her hand, the symbol pulsing with a faint, ominous light. As Sable's mask of betrayal slowly crumbled, the soft creaking of the door was drowned out by the sudden jarring silence of the lanterns, which flickered wildly before plunging the room into darkness, leaving Arya staring at the blank face of Kellen Darkshadow, his eyes still locked onto hers with an unnerving gentleness, his grip on her hand suddenly and terrifyingly empty. Arya's breath caught in her chest as Sable crumpled to the floor, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and desperation. The lantern's sudden flicker had seemed like a cruel joke, plunging them into darkness that was already suffocating. Arya's gaze locked onto Kellen's face, but his expression remained impassive, a mask she'd grown accustomed to wearing herself. It wasn't until Sable spoke, her voice barely above a whisper, that the truth began to seep through the cracks in Arya's mind. "I was trying to protect you," Sable said, her words spilling out like a pent-up dam. "The others, they're not what they seem." Arya's grip on Kellen's hand tightened, her mind racing with possibilities. What did Sable mean? The others? Who were they? And why would she be trying to protect Arya from them? As the darkness seemed to press in around her, Arya felt a cold, hard reality creeping up her spine like ice. She had been blind to the truth, just as Sable had been blind to the danger that lurked within their own pack's ranks. With a sudden jolt, the lanterns flickered back to life, casting eerie shadows on Kellen's face. He stood, his eyes never leaving Arya's, and began to move towards her. Thought it was what he said next. "You're not who you think you are." That made Arya's heart skip a beat. And then, just as suddenly, the lanterns went dark once more, plunging them into an inky blackness that seemed to swallow all sound and reason, leaving only the faint scent of blood and decay. Arya crouched beside Kellen, her hands extended in a gesture of trust, but her mind racing with questions. The lantern's sudden darkness had left her disoriented and wary. She eyed the shadows cast by the dying flames, searching for any sign of escape or betrayal. Kellen's low, smooth voice was like honey to her ears, soothing and calming. "You're not who you think you are," he repeated, his words sending a shiver down Arya's spine. Her eyes locked onto his, and the air around her seemed to vibrate with tension. Pride threatened to overwhelm her, but she pushed the emotion aside, focusing on the task at hand. She needed to escape this place, to find answers about her past and the strange symbol etched into her family's locket. "What exactly do you mean?" Arya asked, her tone laced with caution. Kellen's gaze never wavered. "You'll see," he said, his words dripping with an unspoken warning that made Arya's skin crawl. The air seemed to thicken around them, heavy with anticipation. Suddenly, a twig snapped outside the lantern-lit window, causing Arya to shift uncomfortably. She turned away from Kellen, her eyes scanning the darkness beyond their fragile sanctuary. Her eyes snapped back to Kellen's. Her gaze locked onto his as the scratching grew louder, and she realized she was trapped with him in this lantern-lit room and in this desperate, uncertain future. Kellen's voice dropped to a whisper, his words a stark contrast to the growing unease. "We have to make a choice, Arya. Stay with me, or stay with yourself." Arya's gaze remained locked on Kellen, her eyes flashing with defiance as she refused to meet his plea. The scratching in the walls grew louder, more insistent, but she stood firm, her back straight and her shoulders squared. "I'm not going to be swayed by your words, Kellen," she clipped, her tone a mask of detachment. "I've been played by those like you before, and I won't fall for it again." Kellen's face fell, a fleeting expression of concern etched on his features before he regained control. His voice dropped to a gentle whisper, a stark contrast to Arya's clipped tone. "You're the only one who can survive the Alpha's transformation, Arya. You're our best chance at renewal," he cooed, his words dripping with persuasion. "I see it in your eyes, Arya. Your pupils constrict, your jaw clenches, and your shoulders tense. You're meant for greatness." Arya snorted, her eyes rolling in disgust. "Save it, Kellen," she said, her tone sharp and dismissive. "I'm not some magical solution, just an Omega who's been exploited my whole life." Her voice was laced with bitterness, a hint of resentment that twisted her lips into a scornful curl. Kellen took a step closer, his eyes burning with intensity. The air around him seemed to thicken, his presence drawing the very life out of her. "You're more than that, Arya. You're strong. Your shoulders squaring, your jaw setting, and your eyes flashing with a fire that hints at depths I dare not explore," he said, his voice low and husky, laced with conviction. "And I'll do whatever it takes to protect you, to keep you safe from those who would seek to harm you." Arya's resolve wavered, a tiny crack forming in her arm. She felt the weight of Kellen's gaze like a physical touch, and for a moment, she was lost in its depths. The scratching in the walls faded into the background as she stood there, frozen in time, as the forest seemed to whisper a single word.